Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Truth Squad podcast. This is going to be podcast episode number 1. And my name is Eli, and I'm here with...
Sam.
Yes, and the reason why we wanted to start this podcast is we just feel that there's a lot of disinformation out on the internet. Especially with your mainstream news medias. There's so much that...
it's hard to decipher really what's going on.
Yeah, don't you feel like really that it's being controlled? I mean, is that safe to say?
I think that's obvious. I think that's blatantly obvious.
Yeah, like one of the most interesting things is, have you ever seen where they brought up YouTube video clips of going to different stations like Fox News, CNN News, and they're literally reading from like...
the same talking points?
The same exact talking points.
It's literally like the same script over and over again.
Yeah, and it's especially funny when you see it in a YouTube clip because they're going by so fast.
Yeah.
And you just see different people saying the same thing. Like it's complete, utterly... stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. But that's the real reason why we wanted to start a podcast, because we believe that there's a lot of things that you got to have an open mind about. We're going to touch on some pretty crazy things.
Yeah, definitely provocative topics, and I mean, really, like nothing is going to be off the table. I mean, because really, why would it be?
Right, and that's, I think you brought up a good point, is keeping things completely open. That I believe what's awesome about a podcast is the fact that we control the content in it. We don't have to say, well, this might offend somebody, because if it offends you, then really maybe this isn't the perfect podcast for you, and that's okay. But we are going to talk about weird things, UFOs, aliens, and government control. And I know saying that, you might instantly be like, whoa, wait a minute, this is going to be a crazy podcast. Bunch of weirdos in it.
Get your tinfoil hats out.
Yeah, get your tinfoil hats out, exactly. But, these type of things are going on in the world, and it's really easy for someone to hear that and completely dismiss it. But, I mean, everybody out there has had a weird experience. They've seen something weird. They've heard something weird.
Absolutely.
I mean, how easy is it for people to dismiss ghosts, but then they're sitting in their house and...
they get the willies.
Yeah, it's something that they feel like they're being watched or something like
exactly.
that.
It's like almost everybody that says that they're not a believer really has that grain of truth.
Yeah.
And then when nobody's around, nobody's looking, they're like, oh God, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And those are the things that we want to touch base on. And, with other podcasts that I listen to, I find it funny that they're supposed to be an open-minded podcast, but there's some topics that they kind of poo-poo on. Mm-hmm. But then they're the same people that do believe in, like, ghosts and would say that they've had UFO experiences. But then when something else radical comes up, they kind of want to poo-poo on it.
It's literally like they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. And that, for me personally, that's just one thing that I hate.
It actually is a pretty big pet peeve of mine. And as much as I still like listening to those podcasts... it kind of makes me hesitant a little bit about what they really are trying to push. Well,
that's the thing. You almost have to listen to it, and you have to listen to the other side as well, because somewhere in the middle is going to get the truth.
Exactly. And I hope in this podcast that that's something that we can touch on. Hopefully we're going to bounce back and forth off of each other, and, if there's some things that I might agree with that, Sam doesn't agree with, we'll be able to come to the middle and maybe find that truth that might be there. And that's a lot of the reasons why we want to do this. It just kind of gets to a point where I have a lot of beliefs myself. I have a lot of points that I want to make, and I want to get that out to people. And, if I can get somebody to, like, maybe look at something in a different way, then I think that would be a good thing.
We've done our job.
Yeah, exactly.
We have done our job at that point.
So that's kind of what we want to touch base on in this podcast. This is episode number 1, so, who knows how it's going to go.
Exactly.
But it's something that we're definitely here to stay. We're here to do. We're here to progress. Hopefully that you guys will progress with us. Like I said, we're going to be touching base on, government control stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a weird topic because...
it's everywhere.
What you have is both sides. And if we're talking mainstream beliefs, we're talking conservative and liberal sides, right? I think that, for me personally, I don't want to just see it from a conservative or a liberal side. I want to see it from what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And, kind of a hot topic right now is the fact of our borders being open.
Yeah.
Now, somebody can look at that, and if they're conservative, they can say, well, we got to close borders and be tough on crime and no illegals. And if you're liberal, you might have the view of, hey, this is a free country. We're all immigrants. Let's bring them in. But what I want to, uncover is why would liberals, maybe say that?
To be completely honest with you, I honestly believe that the whole reason why they want to keep it open is to create a whole new voting block specifically for the liberal base, so that way they can take stuff away from us that the new voting block just does not understand. Not only do they have a language barrier, they have a culture barrier. We barely have our own culture of our own. I mean, this is a 300-year-old country. Mm-hmm. So it's not like countries in the past didn't have to close their own borders so that way they can, develop and then open back up in order to allow new people in order to A, diversify, B, bring new industrial components to their countries. Without new people, there won't be innovation. I mean, that's definitely true. Who's to say that one of these new people that comes in won't be the next Einstein?
Well, right, and that's what's kind of a double-edged sword. I'd like to say about it is that, yeah, I agree with. We can't just say that everybody in America are the people that can just innovate. I mean, look at our rocket program. Mm-hmm. Most of those people came from World War II. Brass, World War II scientists that were fighting on the Germany side.
Paperclip.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as that was over, we snatched up them scientists and they helped develop our rockets for NASA.
Yeah, but one thing that's not talked about is that half of the German scientists that did come over from Operation Paperclip actually originated and studied in the U.S. So that's something that they don't actually like to touch upon.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so not even. It's like so difficult to explain because anytime you try to think of any kind of topic whatsoever, it's going to be completely convoluted because it's always been drowned out by misinformation and stuff like that. So even to try to get to the truth of that in itself is going to be very difficult to find. But there are sources out there. I mean, anything that we talk about or say, you have to do the research on your own because then you can call us out. Because I'm definitely not one to say or shut out anybody else's opinion because I'm always about learning.
Exactly, and I think that's a good point to bring up is a lot of the stuff that we talk about, we've done our own research. And hopefully if you guys find something that might be conflicting with what we're saying, sure, absolutely, bring it up, email it to us. I mean, we'd like to see those things and read it for ourselves and maybe introduce that new theory or whatever.
Evidence to the case. I mean,
exactly.
Really, because that's basically what this is. This is like almost like a trial of life. I mean, that's the way that I feel like it is. I mean, we're here once. What are we going to do with it?
Exactly. So, especially if you found good information, why wouldn't we share that with the rest of the world? I mean, that's the point of having this kind of soapbox, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So we definitely encourage you guys to do that because I think that it would be fascinating for everybody.
Absolutely.
So going back to kind of the open borders thing, so do you think that the sole purpose for having our borders so open right now, and we know that there have been cases of people just walking straight over from
Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. Not even having any sort of passport, nothing. I mean, they've came over so easy. We know that it's so open, but do you think that the reason why liberals want that is specifically for the next election vote?
I don't think that it's that at all, or just that at all, rather. I think there's this thing of, how do I say it without, I mean, it's almost like you can't talk about these kinds of subjects without sounding crazy because, I mean, really, we live in a world of craziness, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I honestly believe that it's also about bringing disease and pestilence to the country. I mean, not to say that those people are bad people because they're, some of them are disease-ridden, and it's just because of the way that they've lived. Their company might as well be a company. Their country's collapsed. I mean, their country doesn't care enough about them to keep them within their own borders. I mean, United States right now is trying to fight tooth and nail to keep the Americans abroad from renouncing their citizenship. they're actually overcharging them in order to leave the country, to leave their citizenship. I mean, the price of renouncing your citizenship almost tripled because of that alone. But the Americans that are abroad can afford that type of stuff. I mean, it's literally like less than a fraction of, like less than 5%, 0.5% of what they actually take home. So it's not like they're really losing much as far as that goes. But they're making it difficult for the common person who doesn't agree with that same philosophy that's going on to do the same. So America wants to keep their people in. Why doesn't Mexico? Why doesn't Guatemala? Why doesn't Nicaragua? Why are they putting them on trains, documented trains, through South America, not necessarily through South America, through Central America rather, up to Mexico, and as long as they don't get off of that train, they can come right into the United States.
And what's fascinating about what you're talking about is I want you to tell everybody kind of your heritage and where you come from, and especially your parents. I mean, and this is what makes your side of it so fascinating.
Well, I am Hispanic, and but I am Puerto Rican. We grew up in, as far as Puerto Ricans go, we're a commonwealth of the United States. So we're not even a state. We don't get major tax breaks as far as the country in itself goes. I mean, a lot of people try to vote to make it a state, but it's not the same thing as being a Mexican, being a Guatemalan. There are tons of advantages that Puerto Ricans get that those people don't. We get support and backing militarily from the United States. So in my aspect, in my view of things, I really don't have much of a leg to stand on, but I do understand the language. And that's one thing that most Americans don't have. So I understand the kind of rhetoric that they're being fed. They're being told that as long as they get to the United States, they're home free. So whenever they do get here, they've got two choices. They can surrender themselves to Border Patrol and get basically a ticket that says that they've got to show up to court. And they set those court dates out for years ahead of time. So they can come in their eyes, legally report to the authorities and go back to wherever they want to go within the continental United States. We're talking Midland, we're talking California, or border states is really what I meant to say. California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas are really the big hitters, because guess where they are. So it's just a very difficult and sensitive subject. I mean, to be completely honest.
It is, and with that being said, I honestly, if I were to put myself in their shoes, I would be doing the same thing.
Exactly.
If you're coming from a country that's so ran down and completely collapsed, especially how dangerous it is with the drug cartels. I can remember 15 years ago that it was nothing to go to Cancun or, another resort down in Mexico. But now, I honestly wouldn't think about it. So coming from their side of it, I don't blame them for wanting to come over here and trying to make a better life. Mm-hmm. But what I think should be done is a more responsible way of bringing those people in.
Absolutely. There should be, the CDC should be at the border. It's simple as that. And what they do is they turn their backs to the border situation. The Border Patrol is not trained, nor they're equipped to handle the type of diseases that are coming through the border.
And what I find fascinating about the whole subject when we're speaking on sides of conservative or liberal, it's super easy for somebody that's not a conservative to say, well, you're just a bigot, you don't want Hispanics in, you don't like them. But what I think is hilarious is it's not the fact that we wouldn't welcome people from other country in.
No.
What I think the major point is like I said, bringing them in responsibly, making sure that they're not bringing tuberculosis into the United States, making sure that these other diseases aren't being brought into the United States. I would welcome anybody into our country.
Exactly. I'm definitely all for diversity. The most thing that I love about America is that it's got everywhere in the world in one place. And I love it, but I don't want to get sick from it.
Right. And we just want everybody to pay taxes.
And it's not even that. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we all didn't have to pay taxes? Oh, geez.
I mean, that's a whole nother subject.
Oh, man. But yeah, I mean, at this point, even right now, if I lived in Detroit, I've got two options. Any other of the 48 states or go to Canada. And I think I'd probably rather go to Canada right now.
I know that's a fact. So anyway, another thing that we are going to try to do on this podcast is we want to also try to bring in guests, and I know that this is kind of a quick switch,
Yeah, bait and switch.
Yeah. But we want to try to get guests on our podcast, and hopefully, if when we first start off doing this, it's a lot of the guests might come in through our Skype because that's just going to be easier.
Yeah,
but when we get our place of our own to actually go in and do a podcast, we want to have in studio guests. That way they sound as clear as we are. Because I know that one of my biggest things that it's kind of hard to listen to a little bit is when you have somebody on Skype and the audio is not that good.
Exactly, and it reminds me of the old commercials. Can you hear me now?
Right, exactly. And especially when you're listening in your car, sometimes they're louder than they should be, and it kind of hurts your ears or hurts your speakers.
Oh yeah, especially if you got headphones on, and if you do, I do apologize.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've all been there being at work.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the direction that we want to take as well, because having a guest on kind of gives it more diversity, and we can have their specific viewpoints that we can kind of hit off of and talk about and discuss, and I think that's going to be a good thing. But that's going to be in the future when we start kind of rolling these episodes out and kind of getting used to everything. Another thing that we're going to try to do is some things are going to be a little lighter. We want to make you guys laugh. If we find like an interesting clip that actually relates to our topic that we're talking about, I want to play those clips. That way, not only does it kind of give it some credibility, you guys aren't just assuming that we're kind of talking out of our butts here.
Yeah.
So if we find those, I'd like to play those on there, and that'll give some contrast to it as well.
Yeah, one of the other biggest things that we want to do is that when we do have our own talking points, we want to share out links to show you that our opinions come from somewhere. And if you have a contradictory side of it, we want to know where you're getting your sources from. So if you know or you have an idea that something might be incorrect that we're saying or calling us out, please back it up.
Right, and that's a good point. On our website, it's not up yet, but when we get it up, all of our links from our talking points, they're going to be in the website. They're going to be under the comments with the episode. So when you guys comment on it, yeah, sure, share your opinion. That's fine. If you have an opinion, that's good. But if you're saying, something that we're not right about, or you found something that trumps what we're saying, go ahead and post a link. Don't just spew hatred.
Yeah.
That's one thing that, honestly, I really won't tolerate too much.
Yeah.
Is just straight hatred speech.
Yeah, don't spit venom.
Yeah.
This is not about hate.
Right, and that's what you touched on earlier. This is about us all learning, and all this kind of swimming through the disinformation. So when we have this site, we want it to be a place where people can come and actually get the information that they need, because we already hear so much disinformation on the internet that it's really not something that we need to bring to another site.
No.
So if you have nothing but hate, venom, keep it to yourself, keep it at home.
If you don't have anything nice to say,
don't say it at all.
Well, I don't know. You can say not nice things. I'm not trying to censor you, and that's the last thing that I want. Is that I'm completely anti-censorship. In my personal view, nothing good comes from secrets. So when things happen in the cloak of darkness, it's probably not going to be a good thing for anybody. Right,
and we don't want it to make it seem like we're censoring you. But just with that being said, play nice.
Yeah, exactly. Play nice.
So there is a couple of stories that I find interesting that I wanted to kind of bring up on this first episode. And I ran across a story, and this is coming from the Daily Mail website. And I actually found it on the Drudge Report, and it linked to the Daily Mail. But it talks about these green alien eggs that are washing up on beaches. And it looks like, if you look at the pictures, it literally looks like green yarn balls is kind of what it resembles.
It really does.
But it looks like there's just hundreds, if not thousands of them spread across this beach that have been washed up to shore. And a lot of them are in like perfect balls. And apparently what it is it's free-forming algae or moss. And one thing that I found fascinating that you kind of said earlier
is, how did it get there?
Exactly.
How did it get there? We've heard of space rocks. We've heard of water molecules being transported on asteroids. But the question is, how did it get there to begin with? Because space in itself does not necessarily, from what I understand, and don't get me wrong, I am not a scientist. From what I understand, doesn't just generate in space. It gets created through molecular evolution from dying stars. So how it actually ends up in space is a great topic. Now, from what we all know is that the Earth is constantly changing and evolving as far as the continents go, continental drifts. But what's actually driving that drift? One theory is what's called the hydroplate theory. Everybody knows the what is it called, the deluge, the global flood that took place. Right. Other people may know it as Noah's flood. But what is a hydroplate? I mean, before the global flood, considerable water was underneath the Earth's crust. How it got there is a whole nother story in itself. But it is there. I mean, we all know that there's water underneath the ground. How did they get there? That's a whole nother story, like I said. But pressure increases in the subterranean water, which of course will soon be explained. But it ruptured the crust, breaking the Earth into different plates, and that's how we've got jigsaw pieces that actually fill, like fit together. I mean, everybody can see that through the global map. But basically, what the hydroplate theory says is that water, the water table actually broke and split the Earth very quickly, very rapidly, and that's what actually created mountains and not just mountain formations or geological formations, but like the Grand Canyon. It also explains submarine canyons, canyons that are underwater, magnetic variations on the ocean floor. It also explains coal and oil better than our normal theories. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. But that's just one theory. So whenever these explosions took place with the water coming up from the underwater tables, or the underwater tables, yeah, exactly. They actually shot stuff into the air. I mean, because just like geysers do, think about if a volcano spat, what is it called, magma? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so high that it went out of the Earth's atmosphere. It would probably form a rock and then eventually fall back to Earth. So I can definitely see how Earth's crust, water molecules, and moss would end up returning back to Earth via meteorites, falling back to Earth. Basically, my personal belief is these things are coming home.
Well, but do you think that, because, I mean, I don't know that if moss could actually make it through the Earth's atmosphere. I think that it may burn up. I think what might be more fascinating is that if there's tides and stuff pulling to and from in the ocean, I honestly think that this stuff was formed in the ocean. And then the bigger question is how did they form? I mean, how did they form into a ball? Because what you're talking about in space, a lot of people think because of the vacuum, and I know that you hit on the vacuum part before the podcast started.
Yeah, that it does form into a ball. I mean, it's a well-known fact.
Yeah, and a lot of people actually believe that that's how planets are formed, is because asteroids hit each other in space, and then they just kept spinning because they're in a vacuum.
Exactly.
And then other debris kind of struck it as well, and eventually you start forming kind of this hard rock that turns into a planet that's perfectly round, right? And it's caused because of the vacuum. Those are some of the things that we do know. But what's interesting is the balls that we're seeing here almost look like they were formed in a vacuum space, because if you're looking at the ocean flowing from to and fro, I don't ever think that it's pushing together in a vacuum.
So these things didn't fall out of the sky?
No. And when
I
described it to you earlier, I think that you were assuming that they fell out of the sky.
Because why wouldn't it, right?
Right. Anything that's weird falls out of the sky.
Right. It's like, oh, geez, where did that come from?
No, and I think that when I told you earlier, I was telling it to you in a way that you assumed that it fell out of the sky, because I didn't describe it very well.
Yeah, no, you didn't, sir.
So I'll put that one on me. But it still, the fact remains that these are like perfect moss balls. And I just don't see them, I mean, maybe rolling in the ocean.
Well, I mean, they're saying that there's all kinds of underwater vortices, or vortexes, if you're so inclined to call it that. But yeah, there are tons of them. Bermuda Triangle's a huge one. The Michigan Lake has its own triangle, or the Great Lakes. I think it's Lake Erie. It might as well be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eerie enough. But yeah, it's
but what's weird,
strange.
though, is they all look to be about the same size. There's not, I could maybe accept that if they were, like, if there's some big ones, if there's some small ones.
There are some little ones here.
There's little ones, but if you would think that nature itself, if these things start tumbling, and because I guess from the article they said that there's kind of like tumbleweed type stuff that's in the ocean but it's dead matter. And so the tumbling, like, weedish thing in the ocean is all dead plants that kind of form up together. What's interesting about these is these are actually, like, living plants. Wow. And this is something that we've never really seen before. But what's odd to me is that there's not giant ones, because if they're just tumbling through the ocean, forming, you know what I mean? Are they picking up other moss? Are they picking up other algae? And if that would be the case, why wouldn't you have bigger ones? Because it seems to be, they're small ones, but they all seem to be about the same size. Is that making sense?
Roughly, yeah.
But I just find it weird that, look at that. And I know you guys can't really see it, but if you went and checked it out, they look like balls of yarn.
Yeah.
Green balls of yarn. But apparently,
I would like to see what a Japanese chef does with that.
Right? Probably make some delicate dishes with it.
Yeah, that looks kind of tasty. I don't know, I'm a weirdo, but that's okay.
But yeah, you guys can go check it out. It's
alien. See, look, alien eggs. Where did they come from? See, baffled by UFOs, unidentified floating objects. They washed up on a Sydney beach. So this took place in Australia, where of course the toilet water spins the other way. So definitely weird stuff going on over there.
That would be why they form balls, is because the toilet spins the opposite direction.
Exactly. Over here, they form papers.
Another weird article that I wanted to touch base on, because it kind of freaks me out. I am not a very big proponent of Big Brother. And I know that there's a really two-edged sword to it. I get it with, everything that's going on as far as terrorists go and everything like that there should be some sort of surveillance. But it doesn't have to be. And
to what extent?
To what extent is the question. Exactly. And I think that is something that's kind of been pounded by a lot of media sources, podcasts, everything.
No.
I think we can all agree that all of our phone conversations and all of our data should not be stored.
No, because literally once you identify if somebody is not radical, move on to the next person. Why would you create a whole entire profile on them? Why? So when they dissent, you can actually pull up their profile and attack them any way you can?
Well, another thing that's interesting about that is that a lot of people think that people that are running for office, if you're not a specific candidate that they like,
blackmail.
Yeah, they can pull up all of this information that you've sent out, all your phone conversations, and blackmail you with it to try to get you ran out of the race. What's interesting about that is that and this is speculation, I just want to point that out, is that we've already had candidates coming up in the November election mysteriously drop out. And I don't know if they've specifically said why they've dropped out.
Oh, you're talking about the Kansas Greg Orman?
Well, I think it was Brownback, wasn't it?
Well, no, yeah, but the reason why I think Brownback is pushing against the other guy that fell out. I can't remember exactly who's wanting to drop out, but it's the Democratic candidate. And but the reason why Brownback doesn't want the Democratic candidate to drop out of the race is because then all those votes would definitely go to Greg Orman, which is the independent. Now, Greg Orman, I'm not a proponent necessarily. I don't know exactly what he stands for, but I do know that he has played for both sides, which means that, is he a shyster? I honestly don't know. There are attack ads that say that he's a big promoter of Obamacare, which is something that I'm definitely not a big fan of.
But those attack ads are kind of gross too, don't you think?
Exactly, and the fact that they have to resort to attack ads, it's quite telling. To be completely honest with you.
I assume that this attack ads have probably always been there. Before there was television, it probably came out in newspapers, big articles about what these people stood for. But I think that once they've came to television, they've become even more gross than, if you're sitting there running a whole campaign and you spin out an attack pad or an attack ad, some of those things might not be exactly
I believe the
correct.
First attack ad came out in 1952. No, I'm just joking. It probably came out back in the 1700s when we were even first running for presidency. I'm sure. I've even heard a theory or somebody say that George Washington wasn't even our first president. He was like our 8th or 9th president. Probably because it was smear ads and campaigns even back then. But back then, they had to take it from town to town.
Right.
It wasn't near as easily widespread and manipulated through mainstream media.
Right.
But going back to the whole security thing, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said that those who give up their freedoms for security will not get both, nor do they deserve either.
Right.
So I definitely think it's time to roll back on the NSA, roll back on the TSA.
But then the question is that's what makes it a double-edged sword, is if we roll back on those things. I mean, we are in such a high threat right now with ISIS that, I mean, at what point should you draw the line? At what point should you say, okay, we can't necessarily record all citizens, but so then how are we going to do this? Especially with our borders being wide open. We don't know who's coming in.
I honestly think the whole recording of conversations is not necessarily going to be as big a threat if they pointed the security in the right places. Right now, they've got internal security measures where you can't even fly from state to state within the United States without getting your junk grabbed. And that's just sad. Why don't they have that type of security at the borders to stop people like that from coming in? Not to say that there aren't homegrown threats. I'm not saying that does not exist at all. But there's a whole different tactic to take care of that type of situation versus preventing the problem to begin with. So if you did not want ISIS to come in, secure your borders.
But then how would you take care of homegrown threats without monitoring everybody? Because we're to a point now where there's going to be cameras on every corner. I mean, how would you deal with a home threat if we're not actively surveilling everybody?
Here's the thing. No one ever said that this life was going to be easy. No one ever said that just because you were born within a certain country, you're going to be safe 100% of the time. I'm a firm believer that sometimes people are going to die in horrific manners. Doesn't mean that we need to be that we need a government to be such a helicopter parent to us that they're going to say you're never going to get burned in some sort of explosion or or die in some sort of horrific death because people don't agree with the way that we run our country or with our beliefs of religion or otherwise. So I am a big proponent of freedom versus security.
So then it comes more down to
personal responsibility,
defending yourself.
Exactly.
Instead of and when I say that, instead of calling the police or something like that, I mean it's goes without saying that we need police.
Security starts with us. I mean, seriously, if you see something suspicious, I'm not saying take matters into your own hands. I'm saying tell the right people.
But that goes on to that one ad that they came out with. It was the Homeland Security came out with that if you see something suspicious, report it.
See something, say something.
Yeah. Well, now you have people that are calling in, crazy things that could get somebody else hurt when that person was doing something as simple as carrying a briefcase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that those huge campaign ads are crazy because I don't have a whole lot of faith in everybody.
Well, the thing is that we don't need campaign ads to promote, because that just makes everybody hypersensitive to what's going on. Yes, people need to be aware. People need to be conscious of things that are going on around them. But I also don't believe that I need a big government entity to make everybody play nice.
So you're talking about more personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
When you're out and you're out on the town, you're going out to do shopping or something like that. We live in a day and age where you should be aware of your surroundings. You should be aware of people. However, it should be your responsibility to take care of yourself. I mean, is that kind of fair to say?
Yes, but you also got to think of the homegrown terror threats that we have currently stopped. Have been documented cases where FBI agents have gone undercover to radicalize individuals, rile them up, and they actually supply the inert fertilizers and bomb making equipment, and then nab them at the end. But would that person have even gone there if somebody wasn't riling them all up?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point, but I think that there's also people that have been riled up and have switched sides without the FBI involvement or the CIA involvement. I think that there are, anywhere you look, there's crazy people.
Exactly.
And there's going to be people that see something on the internet and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I believe in that. And then, President Obama said it himself that these days somebody can get on the internet and learn how to hurt somebody without even leaving their house. And I believe that what makes this crazy is that you have a group of people that are going to do it on your own, and then you have a group of people that are being kind of trained operatively to do it on their own. And to say trained operatively, I mean, that is something that it's hard to say because I don't, at this moment, have actual evidence that I can point you to to say that, you know, these group of guys were trained operatively. But I have heard a lot of scenarios where that's happened. You know, I hate to bring this one up, but the Boston bombing.
Yeah, I was actually going to even go something a lot more recent. How about the underwear bomber? That is a documented case where that is a CIA operative. I want to say his name was Al-Awari or something like that. Did bait. I believe it was a Sudanese, an African originated individual who did become radicalized. But even in the footage that you see within the airport footage, he was not all there. There was obviously somebody who walked him, who accompanied him on that plane. In order to do that, not only that, but somebody was recording the entire time that people were boarding the plane. So that is one instance where people can look up for themselves and see that footage themselves, because it is quite telling that somebody literally led that person. That person that did that was a known CIA operative. I can't recall. I mean, we could look this up right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and look that up. And while you're doing that, one of the things that I was going to say is, you know, with the Boston bombings, I know that that's still kind of a touchy subject, and there is a lot of conspiracy theories on that subject. But what is strange is that you see a lot of, what's the special ops people that are kind of mercenaries? Is it Blackwaters? Or Blackwater operatives.
Yeah.
You do see a lot of those guys out and around where the general area is that the bombs were set off.
Here it is right here. Underpants Bomber was a double agent who delivered a device to CIA and then pinpointed location mastermind for a fatal drone attack. So that
and where's that coming from?
That's coming from the dailymail.co.uk news article, and that was updated May of 2012, May 9th Eastern Standard Time, and that article was by Rob Cooper. So I mean, scores of air marshals were posted to Europe last week to protect U.S. bound aircraft, according to reports. Fears the device would have passed through airport security undetected. Double agent now out of Yemen after handling Al-Qaeda bomb to the CIA bomb maker Ibrahim Hassan al-Asiri. So I was definitely close, but you know, then again, I don't want to sound racist, but when you don't know the languages, things sound alike to you. Is believed to have made the device. So yeah, I mean, he was an Al-Qaeda known double CIA agent. So he not only was he working for the U.S. government, but he was also working for Al-CIA.
So I mean, there you have it, and those are weird instances, and like, you know, the Boston bombing incidents where there's all the Blackwater people standing around, all wearing the same clothing, and there have been videos made, and obviously with YouTube videos, you should go into them very with a grain of salt.
Absolutely, I think, take everything with a grain of salt.
Yes,
even news reports, because
exactly, because those people, and these are the things that we want to touch on, because it is interesting that these news articles are out there, and that you should dissect the news articles, just like you should dissect YouTube videos, because it's very easy to crop things together to persuade your belief or an information that you're trying to put out there. But with what I wanted to say is on the Boston bombing one is that it was interesting to see that the backpack that the younger brother had was the same exact backpack that the Blackwater people were walking around in the same day. And the way that we knew that there were a group of these mercenaries out there is because there were several of them who dressed exactly the like. They had the black shirt, black cap, they probably were 5'11" tactical pants, because those are mainstream when it comes to that, and they were all wearing the same boots. So it's interesting to me that I know that it's a horrific event, and I feel terrible for the people that were involved. But some of the information that you get is kind of strange, where it might make you think maybe somebody was involved in doing this. Maybe these two people didn't act alone, because we all know that even with those two, the FBI were surveilling them for how long? And they didn't go and make a big deal about it and question it until the events happened. Yeah. And if the FBI... Why would you act on it till it's too late? Exactly. If the FBI are so good on stopping plot terrors... Yeah. You would think that these two were definitely the ones, if they were surveilling like everyone say that they were, these would definitely be the ones that you could stop and say, yeah, we got them.
Those were needlessly lost lives, in my opinion, in order to forward an agenda.
Right. Now, speaking of those YouTube videos, one thing I wanted to comment on, because when I seen this, I kind of thought it was distasteful. Some of the YouTube videos were commenting on, like, the guy in the wheelchair, how he didn't really lose his legs and stuff like that. And I think that when you make YouTube videos like that, I think you need to be conscious on what you are saying.
Absolutely.
And I think that it was distasteful to see that, because to me it looked like that guy really lost his legs.
Yeah.
And I just, that just goes back to saying that, you know, when you watch those, dissect them yourself. You know, I personally didn't think that the whole guy in the wheelchair with one of the runners or whatever helping him, I don't think that was set up. You know, there is a famous radio host, Alex Jones, who makes a very good point when he says that, you know, people like ISIS are bred by the CIA, and that there are real terror groups now.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, the CIA has been known to be involved in them, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's not a game. It's like taking, literally, I believe Alex even said this analogy himself. It's literally like taking a bat to a nest of hornets and stirring stuff up.
Right, exactly. And they're a real group, even though they may have been formed by, you know, other government agencies.
Funded, and when we say funded and backed, they're being provided weapons,
and what could be
protection. They could be taken out. I mean, it literally, if the U.S. government can drone strike people with precision airstrikes, they would have been able to take out ISIS camps a long time ago.
Correct, and I think that when someone over kind of canvasses everything with the CIA back them, I think that what some people might be missing is that by funding them or backing them, it could have been as easy as when ISIS was nothing but rebels, we were providing them the weapons and ammunition to fight the group that we weren't exactly getting along with, because that's what we're talking about doing now, is providing weapons to Syrian rebels.
Yeah,
so we could have funded the weapons for these ISIS, who probably used to be rebels, to fight a group that we, you know, wanted them to fight, and now it kind of turned on us. That's what we're worried about.
Enemy of my enemy is my friend is
exactly.
not really necessarily the case.
And that's what we're afraid about now with the whole Syrian rebel army, is that why would we fund them?
Oh yeah, that's where they're talking about. At least the little birdie said it was like 95% of the Syrian rebels are really just Al-Qaeda supporters.
Right, exactly.
So what we're doing is we're giving weapons, what makes it looks good, to a group of individuals who seem like they're going to be on our side and help spread their own freedom, but when in turn they're just going to hand the weapons on over and to the people that we're actually trying to fight.
Right.
So they're not putting much of a fight that they should, whether it's a small group of people who actually do believe in the cause and are being controlled by a head of their organization that really just keeps it compartmentalized within their own organization, where that's the same stuff that we're battling here. You know, our government, has their own agenda that does not necessarily correspond with the average American.
Right.
What we want. I mean, and we're diverse as it is.
Right.
So we can go off on several different tangents on that, but I'll let you pick up back where you left off.
Well, I find it fascinating that when we talk about things such as funding rebels, how easy it is for people to kind of even poo-poo that. Because it does sound crazy, and a lot of people, I know people personally that would think, well, why would the government want to hurt us? And what they're not seeing is the bigger picture of the government and what they're really trying to do. And I honestly believe that what they want to do is have a one-world government. And it's going to first start off with creating just the North America.
I mean, you don't even have to believe it or believe in the theory that Eli is saying. The government has come out and said that on several different occasions themselves. So it's not like, even George Bush Sr. said that, welcome to a new world order in one of his, presidential addresses. So, it's not even a secret anymore. They're basically thrown in everybody's faces, but everybody's preoccupied with the whole other Big Brother. I'm not even sure if that show's on TV anymore. I'm pretty sure it is. People still love that show. But that kind of stuff is not for me personally, so that's why I don't know. But yeah, so they're more preoccupied with pop culture and new trinkets and devices that they don't pay attention to the big picture. A lot of people just can't see the big picture.
Right. And I think it's funny we somehow got on that spiel from Big Brother to what we talked about, and that's kind of how we want these conversations to go, guys. We kind of want it to free flow, but the reason why we brought that up is because Google now is talking about Google 2.0.
I forgot that we even started on that subject.
Yeah.
How do you even get away from it? That's the funniness about it. Whenever you get started on a conversation, it just spreads.
It does, and that's what's perfect, though. That's what we want.
Yeah.
But Google 2.0 is they're kind of talking about their next when the search engine money dries up, what they want to do next. And I find it fascinating that what kind of their next talks are building cities and airports. And
are you talking about like? I haven't read this article, so I don't know. You're going to be teaching me on this one. So you're talking about they're actually wanting to build cities within airports?
No, they actually want to build, like, the way I took it is an airport and a city. So it'll all be like a Google city with their own airport to be able to fly
you mean like when they named Topeka
Google Kansas?
They want to make that a reality?
They want to actually have Google cities.
Multiple cities. So, like, Google's going to be its own sovereign nation at this point?
I mean, I don't know. But what it reminded me of is the Disney town. And it reminded me how crazy that, when you start getting companies that want to be their own authority, because in my mind, that's kind of how Walt Disney felt about Disney town, is that he could have this weird, picture-perfect town that he, like, not necessarily was the mayor of, but kind of had that feeling, you know what I mean? That authority.
He controls. And I
almost
guess,
like a god. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel.
That's definitely a heavy word. And that's definitely God with a small g.
Right, exactly. Let's get that clear.
Yeah. When we say gods, it's definitely God with a small g, because I definitely don't want to piss off the God with the big g.
Right, exactly. But I find it fascinating that when you get companies that make so much money, they become wealthier beyond their biggest, wildest dreams, that their kind of next step is to form their own civilization. And that's kind of the feeling that I got about this Google article, is that they kind of want to make their own little civilization.
I mean, it's not a secret that they have their own Google culture within their corporation.
No, and I mean, honestly, I hear Google's a pretty good place to work. So
you know why, though, is because people don't want to grow up.
No.
I mean, if, to be completely honest with you, if we all didn't have responsibilities, I would love to go, to my next meeting down a slide.
Right, exactly.
I mean, but at some point, people do have to grow up. And the way that they're driving our American culture right now to blame everybody else, you're not responsible. You're still a child. I mean, how long are they going to extend childhood? Up until 30?
Right, exactly.
I mean, we all got to be accountable. We all got to be responsible for ourselves. I mean, I tell you what, if you talk to our own relatives 100 years ago, and you told them what was going on now, I mean, they were pretty much on their own and being adults at 14, 15 years old. I mean, the life expectancy of an average adult was about 35 to 40. I mean, if you look at 40...
Look how young they got married.
Yeah.
I mean, that should tell you right there.
Exactly. So, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of this whole... person who's I should look up their name, but I almost don't want to give them credit for this, but they're trying to say that that we're in the middle of an evolution stage within our own human evolution, is what I mean, because our life expectancy is getting longer, and that we're today's 50 will be tomorrow's 80, or it would be like you get younger as you go older. Oh, not necessarily get younger as you go older, but you would look younger versus, 50 at, in 1980, look closer to 80.
Right.
I mean, times were tough.
So you're saying that the new 50 will look like you're 30.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. You'll kind of retain your youth a lot longer.
Yeah, but you also gotta understand with the way that they're the way that our culture's set up. Our mental state, our mental capacity is also going to be reduced by that much as well.
Well, what's fascinating about that, and I think that the big reason why we look younger as we grow older, is because our lives are easier. That's what you were hitting on earlier. We didn't have to go through the Great Depression. We don't have to go out and work in the fields and struggle and hardly eat. We don't have to face weather conditions like they did have to. I get pissed when I go to my house to my car, and my car's freezing cold when it's 12 degrees outside.
You don't have that comfort of heated seats.
I barely want to get out of my bed when the temperature in my house is 70 degrees. So I think that that's the reason why we look younger. But another good point that you hit on is that our mental capacity is not what it was you know, back when in the 20s or 30s even, you had people that were 14, you know, acting like they're 20.
Exactly.
Look at the people that... Could you imagine today, look at in World War I, World War II, how young the men were that were serving. 18 years old, they were going over and fighting major battles.
And not to mention that a lot of them were also lying about their ages.
So they were younger than 18.
16.
Think about even as crazy as the Civil War, they were much younger than even 18. They were 15, 14.
They didn't really bat an eye at child soldiers.
But could you imagine that today? If I go back and go to the middle schools, I mean, 8th grade even, 9th grade, I would not want them fighting alongside me. They wouldn't have the mental capacity to even do so.
To be completely honest with you, I am 30 years old, and I'm not sure how I would handle an 18-year-old fighting next to me.
Exactly.
Or a 20-year-old or a 22-year-old. But I mean, that's like more of like in a civil capacity, because to be completely honest with you, the men and women of our military, they get trained well.
They do, and let's make that very clear.
They get trained well. So these 18-year-old and 20-year-old soldiers that are out there right now, they deserve every bit of credit that a 30-year-old soldier would. So not to misconstrue what we're saying, but yeah, there's a whole different capacity. If you take somebody who is not specifically trained for that type of situation, because when to be completely honest with you, when shit goes down, you're not going to be able to have the dedication set aside to train somebody as long as you normally would. So you're going to have some people out there that are going to be not so immature. You're probably going to have more friendly fire situations than you would like to. Not that they're trying to attack their own people, but that they don't know what they're doing. So...
Isn't that what they had, though, in the World Wars, was a lot of friendly fire?
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. Not to mention they had, you know, the firearms that didn't really have accuracy.
Right, exactly.
I mean, they were, you know, using black powder and balls.
In the Civil War,
not
that
even
was
just
like
that.
bad.
Yeah. They didn't even, sometimes when they ran out of silver balls, they would pick up just rocks and stuff that they could
throw it
anything that they could stuff in their muskets. So
that's back in the Civil War, by the way, not World War I or World War II.
Yeah, no. We're not that old. So.
All right, guys. We're kind of going to run these podcasts maybe about an hour and a half. It kind of depends on how the conversations go. It really also depends on, the guests that we bring on. Those might be a little longer podcasts because we're going to have a lot more interesting things to touch on. Not to say that.
And different views as well, because that's the most important thing.
That is very important. But we're going to kind of run this podcast about an hour. I know we're coming up onto it. We just kind of wanted to give you guys a taste of what we'll be talking about. And starting off, the podcasts are going to probably be once a week. I'd say that's probably sounds fair.
Yeah.
And then maybe as we kind of progress and get things moving along here, it'll be a couple times a week. But definitely look out for us. We want you guys to be involved with us. We're going to have a website up with blog posts, with hopefully forums, chat section. So just kind of a place where everybody can be involved and keep in mind that we're all learning here and we're all want to find out the truth about stuff. Mm-hmm. And let's kind of just keep it with that atmosphere of learning and helping each other. So with that being said, Sam, do you have anything to say?
I mean, to be completely honest with you, they should definitely look forward to more and more diverse conversations, because trust me, we're not just here just to dissent against the government, because there's plenty of stuff to talk about.
Right, there is plenty of stuff to talk about. And also with that being said, I don't want anybody to get the idea that we're necessarily anti-government.
No.
I think that government is a very, very important thing to have. I just think that it's kind of in a place right now where we need to start fixing things. And I want to be very, very clear. I do not necessarily believe in violence. I don't want anyone to think that is an option. I think that right now we're in a time where we can still fix things through information and keeping everybody informed about what's going on.
Yep.
And making change that way. But I don't want anyone to take this podcast as being anti-government. I don't want that to get out there. I think that government's a very important thing, and our podcast, like Sam said, is not just going to be about government issues. We have so much to bring to you guys. It's going to be a lot of wide variety stuff.
So we can't even fit it all into an hour, because obviously we get sent off on different wild tangents when we were trying to talk about one subject. So
exactly,
and we had like 5 on the table. So
yeah, exactly. And I think we covered 2 of them. So
exactly.
That's going to be the podcast for this week, guys. This is the True Squad, and we're going to be checking out.